I was dying for somebody to ask this. If opiates have a purpose, why does the government limit them? They don't. In point of fact, the government and their drug approval process is one of the most corrupt government processes I can think of. They literally approved OxyContin with the drug company's advice that it was non-addictive. You see, in terms of how the FDA goes through a drug, it's incredibly lobbied. It's incredibly lopsided. When I invent a new drug, I only have to show the government and the FDA the numbers that I want them to see. I'm not required to give them the full unedited data so that they can program it all in themselves and see if the stuff's actually safe. Wonder why that is. But on the backside of that, when people become addicted and they begin to die in droves, the citizenry cries out for intervention. And this is when the government comes through with what I like to call a pseudo-intervention. You see, they drop incredible levels of mandates and scrutiny on physicians and other levels of providers, which actually limit the amount that they are willing to prescribe. And you know how we all hate to get audited at tax time? Well, the government's got a system like that for people who can prescribe opiates. The government monitors this with the use of what's called a DEA number, and that number means exactly what you think it does: Drug Enforcement Agency. And this number has to be issued to anyone who is going to prescribe a controlled substance of any kind. It's a nice little psychological tool to remind every provider that every time they write a prescription for an opiate or a similar medication, that Uncle Sam's watching. Most of them fear investigation with a passion, because when the government comes in to investigate, there's just so much that happens, and it's terrible. It's terrible for the practice. It's terrible for everyone involved. And through this legitimate system of fear, which was invented as a monitoring system, it's just misused. But through this misused monitoring system, physicians do become afraid to prescribe pain medication. Now, you're going to see this a lot more in outpatient clinics where they actually would write you a script for something you take at home. It's not as prevalent in emergency medicine in terms of it being monitored or scrutinized quite as closely. After all, it's understood that when you break a leg, you may want a little something to take the edge off. Although I have to tell you, the comments on my pain management video are quite disturbing. I can't believe that many people are laying there in pain. And honestly, the sad part is, if it had not personally happened to me, I would be less inclined to believe it. And I think that's a stigma we need to break too. I hate to call out the members of my field, so to speak, but I mean, if we're being honest with each other, and I feel like we should be, we need to identify the problems. So in short, the government loves opiates, and it loves the money they get for allowing companies to produce those opiates. They shift the blame down to the expendable people, like doctors and nurse practitioners and physician assistants. And because providers are just trying to survive, they're forced to capitulate.